Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing 3 mini reviews of the first 3 books in the Dresden Files series. If you've watched any of my older videos, you know that I'm currently in the process of rereading the entire Dresden Files series before both Peace Talks comes out in July and Battleground comes out in September, I think. I messed it up on my last video. I think I said October, but it really is September, I'm pretty sure this time. Maybe. So far in my reread, I've made it through the first book, which is Stormfront, the second book, which is Full Moon, and the third book, which is Grave Peril. I am going to be picking up the fourth book, Summer Night, hopefully soon. I'm trying to read like a whole bunch of books at the same time right now. I'm feeling kind of slumpy, so, you know, who knows. I'm definitely not going to read all of the books before Peace Talks get here, but I'm really hoping to get through all of them before Battleground. It's gonna be hectic, especially for the next few months. I don't know what my video schedule is going to be like. I don't know what, like, my response and social media presence is going to be like. We just put an offer in on a house and it got accepted, finally, thank God. So I need to pack up the things that we currently have, and I need to deal with all of that, and then we're gonna unpack. I've kind of been toying with the idea of maybe doing a moving vlog. I don't really know though. I've never vlogged before. I don't know if I want that to be my first one in the middle of everything else. We'll see. I don't know. Who knows? Nobody has any idea what's going on right now. But we are just trying to get everything ready in time for us to go. So with that being said, today's video is just going to be a little mini review for each of the first 3 books in the Dresden Files series, just to let you guys know what my thoughts are on them, whether or not they've changed since the first time I read them, because this is the first reread I've done of all the books in the series. Since I read them like 10 or more years ago, probably more than 10 years ago. I read them when I was a teenager, and I haven't really, like, I've been reading them as they come out, but I haven't done a full reread of the whole series since. So I just wanted to give you guys my thoughts on the first 3 books that I've gotten through so far. So like I said, the first book in the series is Stormfront, and in this you're introduced to Harry Dresden, who is advertising himself in the Yellow Book. He's a wizard for hire. He doesn't try and hide what he is or like what he does or anything like that. These are very much urban fantasy, and in it he kind of works as a private investigator. He takes cases, he helps people with their magical needs if they, you know, so desire them. He doesn't do love potions or love spells or anything like that, but, you know, if you need something tracked down that he can cast a spell for or make a potion for, things like that, he will do it. He's broke. Not many people need a wizard for hire. He gets most of his income by working for the Chicago Police Special Investigations Unit under Karen Murphy. She hires him a lot of times. She kind of has an idea of the supernatural world in Chicago, like vaguely. She hasn't really acknowledged that it exists. She does know something is going on that she doesn't quite fully understand, and for that she hires Harry to come and explain these things to her. Most of the other guys or people in the precinct treat his presence there as a joke, but it turns out, in this first book anyway, and I assume in any cases that he's taken beforehand, he does provide very helpful information to the Chicago police in the form of magical advice. So in this first book, Harry is hired by Karen Murphy, and he's asked to attend a crime scene in which people in a hotel room that were in the middle of doing things had their hearts literally burst out of their chest while in the midst of the things that they were doing. It's certainly not natural. Anybody can see that. Their hearts literally burst out of their chest. It was a very bloody, very disgusting scene. So Karen calls Harry, and he goes to the crime scene and proceeds with an investigation from there. Obviously, as soon as he goes, he immediately knows that it is not something natural, and it's definitely something under his purview, and you follow him as he investigates it. You don't really get much Karen in this book. You don't really get much of Karen in the following books, honestly. The first few don't use her very much as a character, and he does tend to go off on his own a lot, and that kind of puts him under suspicion of a lot of Chicago PD, Karen included, and she does arrest him quite a few times. But he ends up solving the case. That isn't really a spoiler. It's a series of books in which he solves cases for Chicago PD. And I think that this serves as a really interesting introduction into Jim Butcher's urban fantasy Chicago world. Now, as for my thoughts about this, if you had asked me 10 years ago when I was like 15, 16 years old, I would have told you that this was a 5-star read. I mean, obviously I fell in love with the series. I've been keeping up with it ever since I first read them. Now, reading it as an adult and looking back on it and knowing some of the criticisms that Jim Butcher has faced regarding his writing, I definitely don't think I consider it to be a 5-star read anymore. I would consider it probably a solid 3.5. He has an issue. Harry Dresden is a very man's man type of character, and it borderlines on misogynistic at times. He says it over and over again, oh, I don't understand why women these days won't let you open a door for them anymore, why they won't let you split a check, or why you have to split a check with them all the time, things like that. And it's like a little bit on the cringy side, and he feels the need anytime a new female character is introduced to describe them as voluptuous or like super curvy or beautiful or sexy, or like all of his female characters are very sexualized. The only character that I would say he doesn't really overtly sexualize is Karen Murphy, the detective, and he's trying to put her into the hard-assed cop kind of stereotype, but he's still like even still his descriptions of Karen borderline on cringy as well. So that's one thing that I definitely think I know for a fact Jim Butcher improves on in the future, but as far as in the first few books, it's a little bit more cringy than it was for me when I read them 10 years ago. It's still a really interesting read. I love like the urban fantasy idea. I love the urban fantasy world in Chicago. Learning about Harry, learning about his past, learning about him trying to just make it, selling his wares as a wizard in modern day Chicago is really funny and entertaining, and he's got some great one-liners. But I think that some of the time his writing and his portrayal of Harry Dresden does kind of come off as like a nerd who's always lived in his mom's basement, living out his fantasies kind of way. I'm trying to say that in a way that's not super offensive, but like it just feels like a little bit of a wish fulfillment in some of the things that Harry does and says. As for the plot, I think that the plot is really entertaining. I'm not gonna lie, I did bump it down to 3 stars because the decisions that Harry makes infuriates me. The way that he treats Murphy infuriates me sometimes. The way that she treats him infuriates me. I'm not used to seeing them in this dynamic. The books that I've read later on, they're a lot closer, they're a lot more trusting, they've been through hell and back together, and now like we're starting out with them in the beginning again, and I mean, she's arrested him like twice at least. I don't know if that's in the first book, but definitely in the second book. It's just a weird dynamic. They don't really trust each other, and therefore they make decisions based off of that. Harry goes off because he thinks that he needs to protect Murphy. Murphy doesn't trust him, and she keeps suspecting him of committing these crimes, and it just kind of goes back and forth that way, and it's all really just miscommunication errors, and that's one of my #1 most irritating tropes in any book. I will say though, it is still a really entertaining read. I do recommend the Dresden Files to everyone who likes any kind of urban fantasy. If I had to choose between this and the Iron Druid Chronicles, I think that I would pick the Iron Druid Chronicles. I need to go back and reread them again, but they just feel a lot less cringy to me than this does, and as a person, I tend to like Kevin Hearn a little bit better than Jim Butcher, but this is still a really good series, and I'm still really excited to continue reading it because I know for a fact that as I go on, they get much, much, much better. So moving on to the second book, which is Full Moon. This one, in case you couldn't tell from the title, does deal with werewolves. Again, Harry Dresden is called to a crime scene where somebody has been brutally murdered, and I think that there's some kind of symbol drawn around her, so you can tell that it is not exactly normal. It's a little bit occulty, and Karen Murphy, who trusts him even less than she did in the first book, needed his help and called him once again to a crime scene to assist her and give her any advice that he can. So you find out that several people have been getting murdered on the full moon for the last couple of months, and Harry is just now finding out about it, and so he offers his help to Karen to try and figure out what's going on. He doesn't know anything about werewolves really, so he has to do some research via Bob, who is a skull spirit, like a knowledge spirit. Bob is a very entertaining, very pervy, kind of gross character, but he is very knowledgeable, and he helps Harry out by giving him a lot of facts that he needs throughout these cases. And he has to go to Bob and ask Bob for help, and you learn about Jim Butcher's werewolf mythology in this world, which is really interesting, and I'll give him credit because it's really different than any other like werewolf myth that you've heard in any other fantasy, honestly. He divides werewolves into numerous different types, and it all depends on like the manner in which they change or do not change into wolves. There's like somebody that casts a spell on you to turn you into a wolf is different than you learning to cast a spell on yourself to turn yourself into a wolf. Some people use talismans, and some people are cursed, and so on and so forth, and each of them constitutes as a different kind of werewolf. So essentially, Harry in this book is just trying to figure out which kind of werewolf it is committing these murders, and again, who those people are committing these murders, and he tries to help Karen before more people get killed. He doesn't necessarily succeed, and a lot of people die. People die pretty much in every single Dresden File book, honestly. And in this one, you get to delve a little bit deeper into a lot of like the magic system and the magic world and things like that. You learn a little bit more about Harry's past, you learn a little bit more about his powers, and you develop a little bit more of an understanding for the relationship between him and Murphy. Once again, I will say I don't like the dynamic between the two of them in these early books. She arrests him a few more times in this, and he lies to her a few more times in this after promising that he's not going to lie to her, and it's a whole thing, and it's very frustrating to me, and the miscommunication trope is once again very prevalent. Jim Butcher continues to over-sexualize the female characters every single time that they're introduced, that he needs to talk about their very full lips or their very long curvy legs or whatever, and it just kind of it takes you out of the story for sure. Once again, I think I gave this about a 3 stars. I definitely rated this a little bit lower than the first one. The first one was just better, in my opinion. This one was more frustrating on every single level. Mostly because, like, Harry literally promised Murphy that he wasn't going to lie to her and then straight up just went and lied to her, again, for her own protection. And that is another one of my most hated tropes in books. And I know that I'm sounding like I'm hating on this a lot, but those are just the things that really bothered me about this to knock it down to a 3 star, but I still consider a 3 star to be a very good rating. It just means that it's not quite as good as I was hoping it would be. I did have to push myself a little bit through some parts. I did get frustrated with some choices the characters and the authors made, but I did still enjoy it. I obviously am still going to continue reading, and I definitely want to point out that Jim Butcher does a really good job with his world building. You're introduced to all of these different types of werewolves, mob bosses make an appearance, I mean, all sorts of things that you don't expect to happen crop up. Jim Butcher does a really good job of world building. I'm definitely going to grant him that. His urban fantasy Chicago, you just can't help but get sucked into it and just intrigued by what type of mythology is going to crop up next, because you've already got like a self-taught sorcerer, you've got werewolves, you've got knowledge spirits stuck in skulls that like to sneak out to sorority parties and weird things like that. And it just kind of always makes you wonder what he's going to come up with next. Harry Dresden, while at times a little bit of a misogynistic character, does have a good heart. He is at heart a good guy who just wants to help people. It's just the manner that he goes about doing so that can be very frustrating at times. The third book in the series is Grave Peril, and this one introduces ghosts into the world. So you open right into Harry fighting a ghost in a hospital who is trying to kill babies that are in the neonatal unit, and I mean, it's very disturbing. And you're also introduced to Michael, who is a Knight of the Cross, I think his organization is called. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think it's Knight of the Cross, but he gets to carry around a sword. He's essentially a warrior of God. Michael is your typical steadfast, religious family man. He's a fantastic guy, and he's always there to help Harry out of a bind that he consistently finds himself in. And he and Michael are just trying to figure out why these ghosts are cropping up across Chicago and doing things and acting in a way that they wouldn't necessarily normally do. And then they learn that it is the result of some kind of demonic influence, and Harry and Michael are trying to join forces to stop it. You're also introduced to vampires. I believe he kind of briefly introduced vampires in one of the earlier books, but you really get to see vampires in this one. You're introduced to Thomas Wraith, who is a White Court vampire. You're introduced to a lot more of the Red Court vampires. You learn about Black Court vampires, and once again, Jim Butcher really comes through on his original mythology, because it's really not the kind of vampire that you see normally. I guess that the White Court vampires would probably be more what you are used to in like Twilight or like typical YA fantasy, in that they're super attractive, they have like a kind of magnetic pull to them, they feed off of emotions and like sexual energy and stuff like that, and they don't actually feed off of blood, whereas the Red Court vampires, and I believe the Black Court vampires do as well, but the Red Court vampires are, honestly, the description is kind of horrific. They essentially like shed their human skin suit, and underneath it they kind of look like a disgusting black leathery like bat kind of deal. I don't really know how to describe it. He does a very good job of getting descriptive of what they look like, and it's kind of gross. But vampire venom does act as a very potent narcotic, and if it so much as touches you, it will drug you. So it's all really interesting the way that he pulls together mythologies like that. So the first one was werewolves, and then in this one you see his take on vampires, and I think that he does a really good job of that as well. So once again, I think I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I just am kind of disappointed in these earlier books in my reread. I had built them up so high in my head because of the later ones that I've read more recently. But overall, this was a really enjoyable read, and again, I really like it. I like the series, I like the world. It's just a couple of points that I nitpick about it just to let anybody know that those things really bother you, in case like that makes it totally unreadable for you. I totally understand. I'm not sure that I'd be able to get past the wish fulfillment feeling that I get as I'm reading it if I hadn't read these and loved them when I was younger. I don't think that I've gotten a lot more critical about being able to pick that up as I've gotten older, and now it's something that bothers me, whereas 10 years ago it's not something that bothered me at all. But I do recommend these books. I think that they are a really fun and just entertaining read for a lot of people, and the series definitely gets better as you go on. Honestly, I would probably even say you might be a little bit confused in the beginning of the books, but you would probably be able to pick up a few books into the series and not even have to read the first ones. Some people might disagree with me on that, but I think that you would easily be caught up as to the events of the previous books if you needed to be. I would say that the trust issue between Harry and Murph gets a little bit better in this, but mostly because Murph is barely in it, in all honesty. I think she shows up in a couple of scenes in the beginning, but I really don't remember her being that prevalent in some of the later scenes in the books. It really is more focused on Harry and Michael and introducing you to Michael and Michael's family, because Michael is a very key player in a lot of the upcoming books, as is Susan, who is Harry's girlfriend, and her presence in this book and her existence is also very important in some of the later books. And this kind of introduces you to a little bit more of Harry's past as well, where you get to meet his godmother and you learn a little bit more about his mom and his dad and that dynamic. And I'm really excited to see what happens in the 4th book, because once again, I really just don't remember what happens in the earlier books in the series. So those were my mini reviews for the first 3 books of the Dresden Files. I am sorry that this video has been kind of a hot mess. I didn't really write anything down for it, and I'm sure that that shows. But I did just want to get out there my thoughts on the first few books. I had thought about doing a reading vlog while I was like in the process of reading up to Peace Talks, and it just never happened, and now it's kind of too late for it to happen. So here we are doing mini reviews instead of the first 3 books in the series. I'm probably going to lump my reviews into groups again for the next few books in the series, so you probably won't see another one of the Dresden Files reviews for probably a month or 2 from me. But I know this video is pretty rambly, and I know that it's probably pretty long already, so if you have any thoughts on any of the books that I was talking about, please leave them in the comments down below. Please make sure to like and subscribe down below as well, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!